Our story begins in a place of unimaginable age and scale. Imagine our Earth some 4.5 billion years ago. It was not the gentle blue and green world we know today. Instead, it was a fiery, chaotic sphere of molten rock, constantly bombarded by asteroids and comets from the depths of space. Volcanoes erupted with tremendous force, spewing gases that would slowly form our first atmosphere. Over millions upon millions of years, this violent world began to cool. The water vapor in the atmosphere condensed, falling as rain for centuries, creating the first vast dark oceans across the planet's surface. It was here, in this primordial soup, that the stage was set for the most extraordinary event in our planet's history. In these ancient warm and shallow seas, something truly miraculous happened. We still do not know exactly how it began, but non-living chemicals, energized by lightning or the sun's powerful rays, started to come together. They formed complex molecules, and eventually these molecules organized themselves into the very first, simplest forms of life. These were not animals or plants, but tiny, single-celled organisms. For an immense period of time, perhaps 1 billion years after the Earth formed, these microscopic beings were the only inhabitants of our world. They drifted silently through the dark waters, the sole pioneers of life on a lonely, quiet planet. These early life forms, known as prokaryotes, were incredibly simple, yet they held the key to our planet's future. They floated in the oceans, consuming the chemical nutrients around them to survive and reproduce. For hundreds of millions of years, this was the state of life on Earth, a microscopic world hidden beneath the waves. The land was completely barren, a rocky and desolate wilderness without a single speck of green. The air was unbreathable, filled with gases like methane and carbon dioxide. The quiet dominance of these tiny organisms was a crucial chapter, a long and patient beginning to the epic saga of life that was to unfold. The journey of life is one of extraordinary patience. Think of it. For nearly 3 billion years, the only life on our entire planet was microscopic. These simple cells were not just waiting. They were slowly and profoundly changing the world around them. One group, the cyanobacteria, developed a remarkable new skill. They learned to harness the power of the sun through a process we now call photosynthesis. In doing so, they began to release a waste product into the atmosphere. That waste product was oxygen. This was a change of monumental importance, one that would poison the old world and pave the way for a new one, setting the stage for the evolution of all complex life to come. The slow release of oxygen by countless tiny organisms was a global transformation on an epic scale. At first, this new gas was toxic to most of the early life forms. It caused the first great extinction event on our planet, wiping out many of the organisms that had thrived in the oxygen-free environment. But life is wonderfully resilient. Some organisms survived and adapted. They evolved ways to not only tolerate oxygen but to use it. This new, more efficient way of creating energy allowed for the development of larger, more complex cells. These new cells, called eukaryotes, had a nucleus and other specialized parts. They were the ancestors of every plant, fungus, and animal that exists today. This explosion of complexity culminated in an event known as the Cambrian Explosion, around 540 million years ago. After billions of years of slow, simple existence, the oceans suddenly teemed with an astonishing diversity of new life. It was as if a creative dam had burst. Animals with shells, skeletons, legs, and intricate eyes appeared in the fossil record with remarkable speed. Creatures like the trilobites, with their hard exoskeletons, scuttled across the seafloor. Strange predators like the Anomalocaris swam through the waters, hunting this new abundance of prey. The seas were no longer silent. They were filled with the drama of life, a vibrant and competitive world of hunters and the hunted. For millions of years, life remained confined to the water. The land was still an empty, alien landscape. But driven by the constant search for resources and new opportunities, life began its next great conquest, the invasion of the land. The first to arrive were humble plants, likely resembling mosses and liverworts. They clung to the damp edges of the water, slowly carpeting the bare rock in a thin layer of green. Their roots broke down the rock, creating the first soils. Following the plants were small animals like arthropods, the ancestors of insects and spiders. They were the first creatures to breathe air and walk on solid ground, exploring a vast and untouched continent. This period of incredible innovation was not without its setbacks. The history of life is punctuated by dramatic events of mass extinction. The most severe of all occurred at the end of the Permian period about 252 million years ago. It is often called the Great Dying. Enormous volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia poured out lava for thousands of years, releasing catastrophic amounts of greenhouse gases. The climate warmed dramatically, and the oceans became acidic. It is estimated that over 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species vanished forever. The world fell silent once more. But from the ashes of this devastation, new forms of life would eventually rise to take their place. From the survivors of the Great Dying, a new group of animals began to flourish. This was the beginning of the Mesozoic Era, more famously known as the Age of Reptiles. Among them, one group in particular would come to dominate the planet like no other: the dinosaurs. They started as small, agile creatures, but over millions of years, they evolved into an incredible array of forms. There were the long-necked sauropods, giants like Brachiosaurus, so large they would have made the ground tremble with every step. There were fearsome predators like the Allosaurus with its powerful jaws and sharp teeth, perfectly adapted for hunting. For more than 150 million years, these magnificent creatures were the undisputed masters of the land. The world they inhabited was very different from our own. It was a warmer world, without polar ice caps. Vast forests of ferns, cycads, and conifers covered the continents. But during the time of the dinosaurs, another quiet revolution was taking place in the plant kingdom. A new type of plant appeared, the flowering plant. At first they were small and insignificant, but they possessed a brilliant new strategy for reproduction. They enlisted the help of insects, birds, and other animals to carry their pollen from one flower to another. This partnership was incredibly successful, and flowering plants, or angiosperms, began to spread across the globe, bringing color and new sources of food to the landscape. While the dinosaurs ruled the land, other, smaller creatures lived in their shadows. Among them were the first mammals. They were typically small, nocturnal animals, perhaps resembling shrews or rodents today. They had to be cautious, scurrying through the undergrowth at night to avoid becoming a dinosaur's meal. Yet, these early mammals had important advantages. They were warm-blooded, which allowed them to be active in cooler temperatures, and they had hair or fur for insulation. They cared for their young, feeding them with milk. These traits would prove to be vital for their survival in the dramatic events that were to come, patiently waiting for their moment to shine. The long reign of the dinosaurs came to a sudden and catastrophic end about 66 million years ago. A massive asteroid, estimated to be 6 miles wide, slammed into the Earth in what is now the Gulf of Mexico. The impact was more powerful than 1 billion atomic bombs. It sent a cloud of dust and debris into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun for months, perhaps years. The plants withered and died, and the ecosystems they supported collapsed. The dinosaurs, with their great size and need for vast amounts of food, could not survive. Along with them, many other species on land and in the sea disappeared forever, closing one of the most spectacular chapters in the story of life. The extinction of the dinosaurs left a vast, empty world. The once dominant giants were gone, creating an incredible opportunity for the small creatures that had survived. It was now the turn of the mammals. With the great reptilian predators gone, they emerged from the shadows and began to diversify in spectacular fashion. This new era, the Cenozoic Era, is the age of mammals. They evolved to fill every available niche. Some returned to the sea, becoming the ancestors of whales and dolphins. Others took to the air, becoming bats. On land, they grew in size and variety, from giant woolly mammoths to saber-toothed cats and the earliest horses. Among the mammals that flourished were the primates, a group adapted for life in the trees. They evolved hands with grasping fingers, forward-facing eyes for judging distances, and larger, more complex brains. In the forests of Africa, one lineage of primates began a remarkable journey. They descended from the trees and started to walk upright on 2 legs. This freed their hands to carry food and to create tools. Walking upright also allowed them to see over the tall grasses of the savanna, spotting both predators and opportunities. These were the early hominins, our distant ancestors, and they were taking the first tentative steps on the path that would eventually lead to us. Over millions of years, these early humans evolved. Their brains grew larger and more powerful. They learned to control fire, which provided warmth, protection, and a way to cook food, unlocking more energy for their growing brains. They developed language, allowing them to cooperate, share knowledge, and build complex societies. They created art, which tells us they were not just surviving, but thinking and feeling, contemplating their world. This species, Homo sapiens, eventually spread out from Africa, populating every continent on the planet. Our intelligence and adaptability allowed us to thrive in every environment, from frozen tundras to scorching deserts. Today, as we look back on this immense journey, we can see that the story of life is far from over. Evolution continues all around us every single day. From the smallest bacterium to the largest blue whale, every living thing is a part of this ancient and continuing saga. We are all connected threads in a single magnificent tapestry of life woven over billions of years. Our own history is just a brief moment in this epic tale, yet we now hold the power to affect the future of the entire planet. Understanding this shared history reminds us of our connection to all life and our responsibility to protect the wonderful, precious diversity of our living world.